Here to help us with this discussion, clinical psychologist and author of a few good books, including Desperately Seeking Parents, which we evidently are, Dr. Dathan Paterno, my co-author of Ladies and Gentlemen, by the way. Welcome to the show. Dr. Paterno, I want to see what the owner of Marcy's Diner, I'm just going to keep calling it Macy's. I don't know why. I'm boycotting Macy's, and Macy's is on my brain, so I'm going to keep calling it Macy's. I want to show you what the owner of Marcy's Diner had to say when a local news crew showed up to ask her why she yelled at this toddler in her restaurant. Here we go.
And I said, "This needs to stop," meaning her screaming. And I pointed at her, and she looked at me, and she stopped. And her parents said, "Are you screaming at a child?" "Yes, I am." And she shut up.
So, Dathan, finally, I met you. Tell us what you have to say about this.
Well, amen for this woman for standing up. She didn't do it perfectly. I might tinker a little bit with her method, but her philosophy and her ideology are absolutely sound. That is her restaurant, and these parents need to, man up, and they need to take charge. I use that term all the time when I have parents in my office. This is not about the 2-year-old. This is about the parents not doing their job. And finally, somebody stood up to them and said, if you don't do your job, I'm going to have to do it for you. And I get that all the time in my office. If the parents don't do their job disciplining their child and establishing rules and boundaries and self-control, then guess what? They're going to have to see the police, or they're going to have to see me.
I'll tell you, Dathan, I couldn't believe if you just, searched the hashtag Marcy's Diner, it was all over. People saying, "Oh, I can't believe," and even the parents, "I can't believe you would scream at a child." They should have been screaming at their child, not the owner of the diner, after 40 minutes of that child carrying on and the parents trying to bribe the child into behaving respectfully to the other patrons in the diner. What do people think? I mean, why is it that the whole world doesn't get this, Dathan?
Yeah. Well, I think people have what I call NOPE, which stands for no other people exist. And when you go into a restaurant and you don't pay attention to the fact that there are 40, 50, 100 people around you whose rights and whose pleasure and whose evenings are dependent on your parenting skills, well, you're only going to focus on a very tiny universe. And guess what? Parents have a much higher threshold for their children's nonsense than other people. That's usually the case, except for very good parents, I think, who are serious about training their child. But you have to pay attention to the fact that other people are around you, and their needs and wants and rights are just as important as yours. And the second lesson that I think a lot of parents forget is that not everybody thinks that your child is adorable. I mean, I think my kids are all adorable and I love them, but when they're misbehaving, they're not so cute. And you have to be humble about that. The other thing is that you have to have realistic expectations for your child. To take a 2-year-old to a restaurant is a noble thing, and I think parents need to start early with training their children in public. But if the child is teething, if the child is getting sick, is overtired, is colicky, you can't expect them to sit there for an hour and behave very well. You have to be ready to take him or her out of the restaurant for a while. Yeah,
that's a great point. You have to pay attention to their sleep schedules and all of that. Although my husband and I were always adamant. We took our entire family to the symphony, and we always sat in the front, even when our babies were still nursing. And we would walk in, Dathan, and people would audibly, "Ooh!" when they saw us walking in. And as we were leaving, they'd throw money at our kids because they couldn't believe that they could sit all the way through a symphony. But I really believe this, Dathan. I believe it comes from taking them to church. They had to sit through church. We didn't shove them off in a nursery somewhere. Sorry, I'm not for that. If I've offended anyone, well, it's not the first time. But I think if you take your kids into church and you expect them to be able to sit there, in our case, for 2 hours, our church would go, I think that they learn that, hey, once a week I do this. I think this might apply in this particular scenario. And they learn how to occupy their mind. They learn how to listen to the conversation and engage with adults. I don't think most parents are teaching their kids that anymore, Dathan.
No, too many parents are entertaining their children and having either constant movement or constant visual auditory entertainment, i.e. video games, iPads, cell phones. And when you take them away from a child who's used to that, they have to rev themselves up or they get extremely ornery. And so a lot of parents who can't take their kids in public, it's because they're not being quote unquote properly entertained. And so either you're going to have to shove an iPad in their face or they're going to be upset and unruly. And it's just ridiculous. We need to give our children downtime. they need to be able to learn how to sit quietly for extended periods of time. More than 20 minutes is pretty tough for a 2-year-old, and they might need a break. I mean, you have to understand child development. Kids usually at that age cannot sit still for very long, but they need to get up and go to the bathroom. They need to walk around. They need to stretch a little bit, play a little patty cake or something like that, and then sit back down for another 20 minutes or so. The parents could and should have handled this much better.
Yeah. I really agree with you. And I love what you had to say. I had honestly not even thought of that, because so many pundits were saying, oh, well, if they would say anything about the parents at all, they'd say, well, they should have bought an iPad. No, you know what? Kids were perfectly capable of being quiet before iPads existed. It's called a book. It's called a pen and paper. It's called just sitting there and being good kids because your parents expect it of you. But I love that you added to this, which I hadn't even thought of, that you take away their entertainment and kids get unruly because we have so conditioned them that it's all about them and their entertainment instantaneously all the time. You and I should write a book together.
Great idea.
Thanks for being with us, Dr. Paterno. Check out his book, Desperately Seeking Parents.